Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Controversial influencer Andrew Tate's uncensored return last night. It's been viewed over 1 million times so far on YouTube alone. His fans call him a misunderstood maestro of masculinity. His critics say he's a malignant, malicious misogynist. I think he's probably somewhere between the two, but last night, once again, he divided opinion.
I do mean what I say. If I were to see a girl on a private plane on Instagram, for example, I would assume that a man put her on that private plane. I would not assume she bought it herself.
What if it was...
Perhaps that makes me misogynistic.
What about the Afghan women?
There's nothing to do with me on any level.
You don't have a view?
I have a view. My view is that people naturally gravitate towards law and order, and if you didn't have the Taliban, you'd have different warlords operating in lawlessness, and there would be no way to prevent your store or your market stall getting completely robbed by someone with an AK-47, and people are going to gravitate towards a form of law and order. America left. They left a power vacuum, and the power vacuum is now full.
What about their treatment of women? I mean, only tonight they have banned any women from going to university.
Fantastic. Let's get the feminists to go and teach them a lesson. The feminists are so tough, and they stand up and say they can do anything a man can do. Let's arm them up and send them to Afghanistan. I'm sure they'll fix it.
Why can't you just say, on that, you know what, it's completely wrong?
Because it's not my point. I don't understand.
But it makes me think, it'll make your critics think that you don't think it's wrong.
They could ban all men. They could ban all short people.
But they're not. They're only banning women.
Correct. They could ban all short people. They could ban all people with long hair. And none of it's anything to do with me. So they can do whatever they want. I'm not going to go to war with the Taliban.
Do you think you're a misogynist?
Absolutely not. I'm not a misogynist on any level. This is one of those buzzwords they just throw at people randomly. Homophobic, racist, misogynist. They just throw it out at people.
Well, joining me now is Talk TV contributor Esther Krakow and a trembling broadcaster and journalist Jenny Kleeman, visibly recoiling in horror. Let's start with you, Jenny. He's not your idea of a role model.
Well, no, he's not. I see him as a symptom of a problem rather than a solution to it. I can understand why...
What's the problem that he's the symptom
The
for?
problem is that I think a lot of young men feel that nobody is speaking up for them. In a culture where we are encouraged to have identity politics, the only identity that isn't a good identity is a young man or a young white male. He talks in a very straight way and he gives straight answers to some questions, which I think he gives very wrong answers to. But I find him repellent. I think he talks about... He basically creates straw men that he destroys. So he will depict feminism as a particular kind of thing, a kind of man-hating thing, which it isn't.
Well, it is for some feminists.
For a small number of feminists,
I mean, there are some radical feminists who genuinely hate men.
There definitely are. But most people know that feminism is about just thinking that everyone should have equal opportunities regardless of...
Yeah, and one thing we know from Afghanistan, and these heartbreaking scenes today in Afghanistan of weeping female students who couldn't go to university, and men actually in Afghanistan then going out in protest for them. I mean, really heart-rending scenes, Esther, here, of these young women in Afghanistan weeping because they've been told they cannot now continue their education. And then you've got male students walking out in protest. Very brave thing to do. A bit like we saw in Iran with the men protesting in support of the women being oppressed there. This is where he slightly lost me last night, Andrew Tate. There are a lot of things he says which I understand why young men, you feel a bit lost, why they gravitate to his confidence. He's very good at building business. He's proven it. He's made himself extremely rich doing it. A lot of what he says about masculinity and stuff, I completely would sign up to, actually. Yeah. And his confidence can help people. But when he was not prepared to condemn the Taliban
barbarians
for that, because that to me is an open and shut case. If you don't condemn it, then I'm afraid you've got a problem. And it's not about sending feminists in to go to war. As I pointed out to him.
Which I actually do think is a valid point.
Well, it's fine, but a lot of women do actually fight in the armed forces.
Yeah,
so the idea that none of them do is also nonsense.
I think he was using that to kind of attack the more extreme forms of feminism that says, you know, women can do anything a man can do. And he was using that as an example. Yeah. But I do think, you know, you lose people when you refuse to outright condemn sort of 10th century barbarians like this. But I don't think when he said it has nothing to do with him, I think he's not willing to get into dicey territory in that way. But it's like you speak in such absolute terms. Why
Do you think
not?
he's a misogynist?
I don't think he's a misogynist. No, I don't think so.
I mean, a misogynist means somebody who hates women.
Yeah,
I don't think he hates women.
I do think he hates women. I think he thinks women are nothing. I think he would not know what to do with you and I, Esther, because he does not know how to deal. He gives interviews to people like you or to Hugo Rifkin. He'll give interviews to men.
But a lot of women I've spoken to about...
Yeah,
but a lot of women...
But he's done interviews with women. I've seen them before on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he's very polite and respectful.
Yeah, women do. A lot of women do like him.
Exactly.
There are a lot of women who don't know him who seem to hate him, ironically. But I'm not sure it's as clear-cut as he's a misogynist.
I don't think he's a misogynist. And I have a brother who's probably within his target demographic, 23. And I can understand why his message would resonate with him, because it's normal.
I can understand
it's normal, exactly, for young
just...
men to feel like they don't have a place in Western society. And he actually makes that point. I just think when you don't want to outright condemn 10th century barbarians like the Taliban, you tend to lose your case with more moderate people. But again, we're not his target audience.
The fact that his understanding about what's happening in Afghanistan is that it's a feminist issue rather than a human issue.
I don't think he said that.
Well, no, he did. He said, send this feminists in. It's a human issue where we made all these promises to people in Afghanistan and then we left.
Well, let's be clear. We betrayed those women.
We absolutely betrayed Biden.
Joe
As a human
Biden,
being,
in the way we pulled out of Afghanistan overnight, and we betrayed not only people who work with us, the interpreters and so on,
but people
we
who
have left
died
millions of Afghan women have just been tossed back to these barbaric
and servicemen who died for it. But the fact that he sees it, he says, oh, it's got nothing to do with me. As a human being, it should have something to do with it. As someone who says he's
No, I agree.
Brit, it should
I
have
thought it was a
something to do
cop out there. But albeit, again, a lot of what he says, I could imagine if I was a young man, it would resonate with me, probably for the right reasons. I think he's trying to give people confidence and a belief that being masculine is not actually a stick to beat you with, right? You can be a good masculine person. He used to be applauded. Let's talk of somebody who I don't think is a shining example of this. Joe Lycett, who has spent the last month posturing away with his shiny moral halo about David Beckham being in Qatar and representing the Qataris in the World Cup and being paid for it. And then The Sun revealed yesterday a rather uncomfortable truth, which is that he had actually performed himself in Qatar, Abu Dhabi and Dubai in 2015, a series of stand-up gigs for money, Esther. Now, there's a word for this, and I call it hypocrisy.
Well, this is the thing. It's hypocrisy and it's cowardice, because he would say these things, but he wouldn't actually go to Qatar and sit on Qatari state television and say all these things. He can sit back comfortably and rage at their...
But his whole point was David Beckham shouldn't be there and shouldn't be fronting anything for the Qataris when this guy himself has taken it. And his excuse was so mealy-mouthed, Jenny. Oops, I've been caught by The Sun. Well, yes, I did 2 gigs in Doha. Actually, it was 3 gigs in Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Qatar. I kept it secret by writing about it in my own book. Well, no one remembers that from 7 years ago. I was paid a few £100, not keen to say exactly how much, not by Qatar, but by UK comedy promoters who were being paid by Qatar. But it was 2015, when Qatar's laws were exactly the same about homosexuality as they are today, and that went a lot further back then. And so he goes on, and then he says, oh, no, but who should I take moral lectures from? Not from The Sun. OK, what aboutery? It's not about The Sun here. It's about Joe Lycett's hypocrisy.
I think it doesn't look good for Joe Lycett, but I would say that they're different things. The World Cup is about giving soft power on the global stage
so
to
is stand-up
Qatar.
comedians who are... Well, hang on.
He was like nothing in
So
2015.
are gay comedians going to a country which they profess to hate because it bans homosexuality. By going there, they are basically saying, I don't care. I'm pocketing the money. It's the same argument he used against Beckham.
I think with Beckham, it's to do with being an ambassador on the global stage for a country that is trying to elevate their profile. Joe Lycett in 2015,
if I said to you, it's the old thing of Churchill. Was it Churchill and Bessie Braddock when he said he was drunk one night? He said, "Madam, would you sleep with me for £1 million?" And she said, "Would you sleep with me for £1 million?" And she went, "Well, I don't know, Winston." And he said, "Well, would you sleep with me for £1?" No, don't be outrageous. Well, look, we already established. He says, what kind of woman do you think I am? We know what kind of woman you are. We're haggling over the price, right? No, it was a joke. But my point about Joe Lycett is he seems to be saying, I only take a few hundred.
No,
Beckham took a few million. What's the difference?
I think you have to be careful about doing this kind of archaeology about what people have done really quite far in the past.
No, it was 7 years ago when it was illegal to be gay in Qatar.
It's been illegal to be gay there.
He knew that. Illegal to be gay in Dubai, and it was illegal to be gay in the UAE.
Once you sanction this kind of stuff, it's fair game for anybody. Like all of those sports people who it's established that when they were 18, sort of 10 years ago,
no,
this stuff
not
came
buying
up.
it. Rank hypocrite. No. Don't want to see any more Joe Lycett's moral halo, thanks. Thank you, Pat. Well, joining me now is socialite and Prince Andrew's former girlfriend, Lady Victoria Harvey, author and historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop, and the Sun's former royal editor, Duncan Larkham, and from America, the lawyer to 20 of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, Gloria Allred. Well, welcome to all of you, a stellar panel. Gloria Allred, well, first of all, lovely to talk to you, and a belated Happy New Year to you, Gloria. Your reaction when you heard that Ghislaine Maxwell had given this extraordinary interview from behind bars, and I suppose more pertinently to the content of that interview?
Well, I think that she obviously was trying to be helpful to her former friend or acquaintance, Prince Andrew, and that was part of her intent. I can't read her mind. I don't know what her motive was in saying it. Maybe it's because that's what she believes to be true. But it has stirred up quite a storm. But at some point, we should talk about whether there really is going to be a trial, because I have done many settlements with his attorney, not about this case, although you're correct, I did represent 20 victims of Jeffrey Epstein, some of whom had accusations against Ms. Maxwell. But there was a settlement, and his attorney, Andrew Brettler, is very, very good. And for him to say that Prince Andrew, or to have it suggested as a rumor that he is going to file a lawsuit that somehow he was pressured by his mother into the settlement, that, as they say in the South, in some parts of the United States, that dog won't hunt, because that's not a reason to overturn a settlement. And further, likely, although I haven't seen the settlement, most settlements, or in fact all of them that I've ever done, with Andrew Brettler, his attorney, have always included an arbitration clause, which means that he can't just go right to trial, even if he would want to. If in fact he did file the lawsuit, Virginia could make a motion to compel arbitration, because there's always been arbitration clauses. And that would mean it's likely that the court, if it's a court in New York, would compel arbitration, and so there would not be a public trial. At best, there would be an arbitration.
Okay, but Gloria, on the central point of the credibility of his accuser, there's no doubt that the settlement of the case with Alan Dershowitz, in which she admitted that she'd had memory mistakes and so on, that was a serious dent to her credibility. If you were representing Prince Andrew, wouldn't you think that actually, if the main accuser here, who received this huge amount of money, if this other case has basically collapsed on an issue of her credibility, would it not be worth at least trying to go again?
Well, that case ended up in a settlement, not in a verdict. And the argument also could be, and of course I wouldn't represent Prince Andrew, but the argument for a plaintiff would be that, that maybe she had a memory lapse about one person and one set of events. That doesn't mean she had a memory lapse about other events.
Right, but it would be
one last thing, which is
right. But Gloria, you're a very smart lawyer, razor smart, I would say, one of the finest legal minds I know. If you had a situation like this and you were up against it on the other side, wouldn't you think that if her credibility was now seriously in question, if her memory was proven to be completely wrong in another allegation of a similar kind, would you not think that that might open the door again?
Perhaps, but I think it's unlikely. In order for Prince Andrew to have an actual trial, or, even in an arbitration, he would have to prove some kind of fraud at the time. And not only that there was a fraud, that Virginia was part of this fraud. That's a very high bar of evidence. That's very difficult for him to prove, and I don't know that he's ever going to prove it.
Okay. Interesting stuff. Let me come to Tessa on this. Look, I have a view that the moment Andrew paid that check, it was game over in this case. He can't revisit this. He said, I'm going to take it all the way, I'm going to clear my name. Then he just caved and paid a massive amount of money, millions. We're not exactly sure how many. You read between 3 and 10 million. It's, take your choice. But it was millions and millions of dollars to a woman he claims he never met, which never had any credibility, as far as I'm concerned. Why would you pay someone you never met millions of dollars in a sex abuse case? So you put it all together and you think that. But, and it's an important but, if his main accuser, the woman he's paid all this money to, has got now serious credibility issues, why shouldn't Andrew re-enter the legal fray?
It's an entirely separate case. This is absolutely classic. People going out of their way to discredit the victim of sex abuse crimes.
Hang on.
These girls generally go.
Hang on, just look. To play devil's advocate, people aren't going out of their way to do it. She was discredited in her allegations against Alan Dershowitz.
In one
he won
in
that
one
case. Right. But if an accuser
and
admits that she actually lied about that man and told very serious allegations about which turned out not to be true, that's different, isn't it?
I think it's really important to remember that these girls come from chaotic backgrounds, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard to make a case stick, which is why we all have to remember when we've been listening to what Ghislaine Maxwell's been saying. This is a woman who was called out by the judge. She was called out.
You've got notes because you don't know anything about this case.
I do know quite a lot about talking truth to power. I'm sitting here on an NDA, so I understand what it's like
don't know about
as a
Virginia
woman.
Guffrey.
I can tell you quite a lot. She was called out by the judge.
Have you read
Judge
her book?
Nathan?
Have you read
Judge
her book?
Nathan?
Have you read her book, which is a
No.
made-up book? There you
Okay,
go.
I have not.
She talks
I have
in
not
that
read her
book
book.
about taking so many sleeping pills and so many drugs
no.
the weekend at Kinnerton Street that her memory was very hazy.
Right.
She writes that with her own hand.
Let's recall that Ghislaine Maxwell, heinous and predatory is what the judge called her. And she went out of her, one second, she went out of her way to give Ghislaine a 20-year sentence that was beyond the maximum guideline. That is how appalling it was. It was extraordinary to get all those women talking truth to power in that way. So don't let's just finally miscredit. Miscredit Guthrie and her bravery. I'm going to be. Let's just be honest.
Liar.
You can't use language like that.
I just want to finally remind you what Andrew signed his name to.
Okay.
Stop.
I just want to... Sorry for the bad language that was used. There's no need for that. Victoria, here's the bottom line with this. I don't believe Ghislaine Maxwell at all. Right? I think she was up to her neck in it with Epstein. I think she was guilty as she was found guilty. And I find this revisionist bleating she's now doing is all self-centred to try and get herself off the rap. The more interesting question for me is Andrew, because he remains...
He was made to settle. He didn't want to settle.
But he's a grown man. What makes him settle?
The Queen, because he's an honourable person.
He didn't have to settle.
He did. Were you there in the room? I mean, I wasn't there, but I was told that the Queen and Buckingham Palace, basically, he was forced to settle. He had no choice.
I mean, look, let's bring in Duncan here, because...
And they literally just fed him to the wolves.
OK.
Right
hang on, Tessa. I want to bring in Duncan. From a journalistic point of view, if we were pursuing this as an investigation, and you had a woman who made allegations against two high-profile people, and one was a top lawyer, right? Alan Dershowitz is not any old lawyer. This is a guy who represented John Lennon and got him from being deported, right? This is a famous guy in America.
Totally different.
And here's my point. And she makes allegations of a similar nature against him as she did against Prince Andrew. And she's now had to drop that lawsuit, admitting she may have made a mistake in identifying him as one of her past abusers. We know, as journalists, our natural instinct would be to then be very sceptical about anything else that she was saying, right?
Well, yes, but I mean, apart from the fact that this is a case that's gone on for years.
But just pretend it's not her. Just pretend it's like a person has just done this and has openly lied. And then, so what would you think about the case with another person? Do you think she's being truthful?
Well, either lied or she made a terrible mistake based on
just had a very
issues in her life.
creative imagination. And saw
whatever the reason, Tessa, wait a minute. Whatever the reason, she got it wrong, badly wrong, and seriously defamed Alan Dershowitz in the process. And he fought it all the way, and that lawsuit's now been dropped. And that is the same woman who's accused Prince Andrew.
There are all kinds of things that, had it gone to court, that would have probably needed light shed on them and might not have stood up to any kind of testimony at the time. The picture and the authenticity of it obviously being one of those points. But also about the involvement in newspapers more than a decade ago, when the story was being effectively sold to the tabloid papers, which I was part of at the time. And so that would be, in Britain, certainly, that would put a big question mark over any potential victim. But I don't think any of it matters if you take a step back. It doesn't actually matter what on earth Andrew's thinking if he is seriously contemplating reopening this. He's already been found guilty in the court of public opinion. And his appearance on the BBC with Emily Maitlis has just demonstrated...
Well, that was a total disaster.
Well, that was a complete setup.
He set that up.
I can't even tell you what is really behind this, because you wouldn't even understand. But
it wasn't a setup. I mean, Newsnight went to him. He agreed to do an interview.
Yeah,
and he thought he did well.
He basically exposed himself hideously over an hour-long toe-curling encounter with a very smart journalist. Here's my problem with Andrew about all this, right? I remember when the pictures appeared on the front page of the News of the World of him walking with Epstein through a park, Central Park in New York. It wasn't like he just met him in the park. He spent 4 days with the guy at his Manhattan townhouse.
We don't
Here
know
are the
how many
pictures.
days
4
exactly.
days, and they were all partying. Right, lots of women seen coming and going in that time. This is after Epstein had admitted abusing a 14-year-old. After he was a convicted paedophile. So here's my question. Is that you can get round... I mean, everything else can be murky.
Right.
What I can't get my head round is Andrew, son of the Queen, flies to New York for a 4-day jolly.
Do we know for sure it was 4 days?
We do.
Though?
It was 4 days.
No.
4-day jolly with a guy who was a convicted paedophile.
Yeah.
Now, that alone, to me, should disqualify him from public life, right?
I mean,
you can't be a senior member of the royal family and consort with convicted paedophiles willingly for 4 days.
Yeah, but, you know, we have to remember it wasn't such a big story back then.
But it doesn't change the facts of what he did. It doesn't change the facts of what he did.
When it happened the first time, I almost didn't even believe it when I first read it, because it was kind of like...
That's classic.
It wasn't on the front pages back then.
But Victoria, what you've said there is absolutely a classic case. People don't believe it when establishment figures do the unbelievable.
But what I'm saying is, you don't know about Virginia. Like, I've followed this day and night.
Victoria, could I just tell you what Andrew signed his name to? Can I? No. What I've got here are notes from the case that he put his name to. Let me tell you, Andrew accepted. When he signed last year, he accepted that Virginia had suffered as an established victim of abuse.
To anything,
and as a result of public attacks, he accepted that publicly. So are you now saying Andrew's a liar? Because to rescind on that, he's a liar.
He's never admitted anything,
but
any wrongdoing.
But he accepts she was the victim of abuse, of sex abuse.
Say that.
Oh, so now you're saying he's a liar. So
you know, the irony, Victoria, is if Andrew had not settled, if he had taken it to court, then actually, given the timeline of this other case collapsing, it could have been a situation where the credibility of his main accuser had been brought into serious question before they even got into court. In which case, the whole case may have been dropped anyway.
What happened with Alan Dershowitz? I've been in communication with him, I don't know, maybe a year or so, and Virginia kept delaying. Her lawyers kept delaying and delaying and delaying, and his health wasn't good. You know, he was really suffering. And so if you're innocent, why would you keep delaying a deposition, right?
All right. Well, joining me now is the author and playwright Bonnie Greer, Talk TV contributor and lawyer Paula Rowan Adrian, and the podcast host from Across the Pond, Hotep and Jesus. Well, welcome to all of you. All right, Paula, let's start with you, because I know what you're about to say is going to make me infuriated and it's going to be utterly insufferable.
Excellent.
These are two crests that carry images of sailboats.
Yes.
It's got nothing to do with slavery or racism.
If that's your opinion, then you're entitled to have it.
It's a fact.
Well, you don't know that, Piers, and the historians are being asked to look into that. And that's what should properly happen, shouldn't it? Because when you tell us about history and how important history is, what we want to do is to ensure that we have got this right and we are going to grow from this experience.
Yeah, I'm not growing from it.
We're not going to deny it.
I am growing from this experience. I'm growing very annoyed.
And
I'll tell you why.
Why are we annoyed?
Let me tell you why.
Why are we weary
Let me tell you why.
Talk about slavery?
No, I'm not worried about that. I thought slavery.
Tired when we talk about World War I or World War II?
Like everybody I know, I thought slavery was disgusting, and I'm very, very glad that everyone came around to their senses it was disgusting, and that Britain actually led the way in ending the damn thing. Of course I do. Slavery was disgusting. However, it turns out the historians say Manchester didn't adopt ships as an emblem until 1842.
Apparently
35 years after the abolition of slavery.
Yes.
So they would have had nothing to do with it.
And how do we know that? We don't know that. So what you are doing is you are taking one understanding of a situation.
So you're believing the historians that suit your narrative?
It's not what I believe, Piers. Let's be clear about this. We're having a debate. And that's what is important about
it's not, Paula.
It's to be able to have a debate about something that happened in history.
We shouldn't be looking at
humanity.
little pictures of ships on a footballer's crest badge. Who cares? Well, it's got nothing to do with it.
Well, clearly, I'm sure the players at Manchester City and Manchester United, those who advocate, show racism, the red card.
No, here's what's going to happen.
They will care about it.
Here's what's going to happen. The Guardian, which has just been caught with its racism trousers down, right, because it turned out they were founded by a bunch of slave owners, right? So they're the last people on earth to be lecturing about this.
Is that right? Aren't they the right people?
No,
actually?
they're not. They're not. Because I found their hand wringing over that utterly ridiculous. I'll tell you why.
Well, they've apologised.
Every single family in Britain, if you go back far enough, you'll have people in their past, hundreds of years ago, who employed slaves, almost certainly.
And therefore?
And therefore, we know that was wrong then. Why should everybody today who had nothing to do with it think it was all terrible spend their entire time apologising for it?
It's about education, first of all, just education. And the second thing it's about, and you know this, we always rewrite history. We rewrote World War II because we found out about Bletchley. A person who grew up in the 50s would have a different World War II than a kid now because we found out about Bletchley. So we are getting more intelligent. And that's one thing that's happening. And I mean,
Bonnie, you can't be serious.
Hang on. And the other thing, the United Kingdom was actually on the side of the Confederacy during the Civil War, and in fact was going to send a ship to the Confederacy to fight for it when it was stopped and warned by Lincoln and paid an indemnity to the United States.
Who is going to pay me and my family reparations for what the Vikings did to us?
Well, I think you should seek it out.
Who's going to?
Explore it.
Seek it out.
So literally, so we go back over every invasion, every bad thing. Hang on, let me finish.
It is the ideology
let's try and have a conversation.
Denial.
No,
it's not. Ideology of denial.
I'm not denying anything happened.
So then let's deal
with
it.
No, what I'm saying is once you start this woke rampage, there is no end. A bit like the statues of historical figures. They're all... Guess what? Hang on, let me finish. Ladies, give me a moment. All historical figures are flawed. You can find flaws in Mandela, in Gandhi and Churchill. It's why they had to be boarded up, their statues at Parliament Square, so the mob didn't attack them. But if we take this route, everything, all the time, we have to be apologising, paying for... Why?
Well,
How does that move us on?
What's wrong with an apology? Nothing is wrong with that. If you...
I'm very sorry that hundreds of years ago people behaved badly.
It's not anything to do with hundreds of years. We acknowledge it. We always do that. That is what history
Why
does.
should footballers have to remove crests that contain images of ships, which, according to many historians, were adopted as an emblem 35 years after slavery was abolished?
Well, it was abolished, but it wasn't over. Okay, and that's
so
the point.
Are all ships racist?
Well, no, we don't know that, but we need to investigate.
Are all ships racist?
We need to investigate it. Why not? What's wrong with that?
All ships could be racist.
No, why are you going to make a generalization about it?
You see how ridiculous this sounds?
That's a ridiculous point, and you are.
All right.
You are.
So you think
and I think the Irish should talk to the Norwegians.
No, honestly,
I think the Irish should talk to them.
And also the Italians and the Romans.
Wow.
Why not?
Why not?
What's going to happen about the Romans?
Why not?
I need reparations for what Rome did to us.
I think the Irish should talk to the Icelanders.
It's preposterous, Bonnie.
No, it's not preposterous. It's good dialogue.
No, you know what it is? Here's what it is. It's exhausting.
Well, that's different.
Honestly,
well,
this woke mentality is so exhausting.
Piers,
I feel myself literally getting tired as I listen to it.
Exhausted. Try being a black female.
You shouldn't.
That's exhausting.
I am sure being a black female
wait a
can be
minute.
wonderful. I can have its challenges.
We don't need to have this kind of
Trust
argument.
me, walking around being me ain't no better roses
either. If you're
either.
talking about being exhausted, it's the exhaustion of the pursuit of knowledge.
Let me bring in our very patient third guest from across the pond, Hotep Jesus. Hotep, you've been listening to this. I'm under attack here.
Nah, no.
All right. Hotep, my general point is this. I think slavery was horrific. I think if you basically chart back from almost any family in Britain and America, you'll find some evidence somewhere that someone in the family probably was employed in using slavery when it was going on. But I just don't understand the point of this constant series now of recriminations, reparations, apologies, guilt trips, and so on. I don't know what point it serves.
I worked at a tech company once, and we know how rife they are with leftism. And in casual conversation in the office, I said, I want to be a national master in chess one day. And this white girl said to me, she said, don't you feel offended that they used the term master in the title? And I just looked at her like, that thought never crossed my mind. The same thing if I were to go to the harbor and I would see a ship, I would not think of slavery.
Right.
There's a huge fascination with slavery amongst Black people where our educational system, our upbringing has tied us to this travesty in human history and made us want to identify with it instead of identifying with richer parts of our history. Now, here's the issue that this comes down to. Women are going to see the world, frankly, different from men. Women are very emotional. So, of course, they're going to be worried about, what's on the badge and all this stuff. When we look at the UK, right? The UK has about 4 million starving children.
What is this?
Right now. And that doubled since the past 2 years.
My brother, hotel.
Do you think that children that are hungry care about some badges? They can't eat football badges.
Brother, hotel.
What leftism does is they try to sidestep the real dilemmas and worry about all of these frills on the outside, on the exterior.
Well, you know what, Hotep? Let me
get
just,
to the root of the problem.
Apart from saying that you've made two really good friends here with your women get too emotional.
One from the south side of Chicago. Really impressed, brother.
And I'll let you three deal with that after the show. But
really impressed.
I've got two things to say to what you just said. One is there was a genuine debate in Australia several years ago because an academic went on the airwaves and claimed that chess, which you just talked about, was racist because the white pieces went first, right? And I remember thinking at the time, the only time anyone in the world would think that that was the case was if some academic decided to pop his head up and go, it's racist. Nobody actually believes chess is racist for that reason. And secondly, on your second point about current things, I read today that there are between 7 and 8 million slaves in India alone at the moment. Now,
correct.
Now, if the Guardian newspaper wants to launch a campaign against slavery in India, I'm all in. I'm all in for any current slavery going on anywhere in the world. I will join that campaign. But going back several hundred years to a spurious argument, which turns out may not even be historically correct, about badges on football players where they show ships, therefore all ships are racist and therefore they must be removed, to me is preposterous.
Well, they do the same thing here in America. They wanted to remove Aunt Jemima from product packaging. They want to tear down statues. They're tearing down Lee, Robert E. Lee, I believe his name was, famous general.
Wants that to happen, brother.
A whole bunch of people are involved in what Jay-Z has a quote. It goes, moral victories are for minor league coaches. When you really want to get into the nitty gritty of things, you look at more important issues than just badges on a football uniform. I just don't get it.
Do you know something? You just used the phrase nitty gritty. That itself has been banned now.
No.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yes, it has.
No, it hasn't.
No,
banned
I have seen people say that is a racist term.
Yeah, and historians have told them that they're wrong.
Right, so you accept that these historians who pop their head up saying all this stuff can be completely wrong. First of all, I want to get your collective reaction to the suggestion that this is really a female thing. That you women are a little over-emotional about badges.
I've never heard a man say that for a long time.
Right.
So that's
I think that's
an hour.
Well, in the internet fair play, what is your response to
I would have
Hotep?
liked to ask him what he thought about the American football clubs who have changed their names because they referenced various members of society who didn't think that it was appropriate that they should be called those names. We have rugby clubs who have changed their names because they didn't think that it was an appropriate.
But we're not
thing to
talking
call
about
them.
potentially inappropriate or inflammatory names which have evolved over years. We're talking about images of boats.
Also went with the
They're
emblem.
boats.
Well, I know what they are, but it's what they represent.
Can I just say?
Piers.
Yeah, Hotep, come in.
Yeah, please, Hotep.
Yeah. Because she wanted to know my opinion on, I believe
Paula.
it's
It's
the
Paula,
Washington
by the way.
Commanders
No,
now.
we have names, brother.
I'm sorry.
We have names,
say that again.
brother.
Who's the sister that
My name is
addressed me about the
Sister
football?
Paula.
We're sisters
Now we're
now.
sisters. That's so nice. Thank you. Proceed.
Sister Paula?
Proceed.
It's Bonnie.
Okay.
It's Bonnie and Paula.
From the
okay.
south side of Chicago.
Love y'all. Great
Okay,
energy.
brother, keep
and I'm
going.
on your side. But when I see a football team
What side is
changes
that?
names to Commanders, I'm like, what is that?
Are you insulted?
It's a
Do you feel
joke to me.
insulted? Do you feel insulted?
Well, Commander is
No,
surely.
no, I don't
surely
feel
Commander is
insulted.
also.
do you feel shaken
No,
up?
but surely here's the
No,
point.
no,
Hotep,
it's-
Hotep, isn't the word commander itself? It doesn't that suggest white supremacy because most commanders around that time were white.
And you're
so
named
you
after,
change it to something that
you're-
also
you're-
is racist.
and
There
you're
is no
named-
word you
and,
can
and
use.
you're named after an Egyptian pharaoh. So give us. Are you offended by all of this or what?
I'm not offended. Why would I? That's the whole thing. People are offended
Well,
by
you're
the name of the
offended by
team.
people
I'm not
wanting-
offended.
You're offended
no, I'm not
by
offended.
people. Listen, you're offended by people who want to actually pursue an injustice from the past. It's not a strange thing. It's not unusual. It is not
No, I'm
unusual
not.
thing
No,
for human beings
no.
to
You
do.
can't conflate those two things.
Oh, I'm doing it.
I am.
And
I am for that.
Okay, let
I am
Hotep
for that.
respond.
Yes, sir.
No. What she said is just inaccurate. She tried to conflate two things. She tried to say I didn't care about the travesties and conflate that with something about the football team is going to change that.
Right.
No, I agree with you. There are real issues that need to be dealt with. Changing the football team is basically not tackling the problem.
Exactly
You're ignoring
right.
it. It's a way to
It is
waste time.
tackling
It's
the
a way to
problem.
waste a
Sir,
budget.
If we admit to, and this is in psychoanalysis, that there is such a thing as generational trauma, okay, it does exist. It does exist in families, and it can exist in a people. Now, I'm not going to go all the way and say, do this, tear statues down, because I don't think taking a statue down solves anything.
You're going to go after the badges on football.
No, I'm not going to go after badges.
We're going after the debate.
But the
Piers.
debate
We're going
is
after the
okay.
debate.
There is no debate.
There
That
is a
badge-
debate.
Listen.
There is a
this goes
debate.
back to the- this goes back to the gender
Everyone
conversation.
hold their horses. If that isn't a racist term. I don't know. Maybe horses get offended.
Well, if you keep saying it might
Here's
be.
my point, Paula. Everybody is offended by everything. And so
I
once
don't agree with you,
you assume that we have to start feeling guilty for our past, there is no end to it.
Who's
I
talking
think
about
the Irish.
guilt?
I think the
Who's
Irish
talking
should
about
go
guilt?
after the
That's a very
Icelanders
emotional
because
term
because
to
the
use
Irish were
in a
enslaved
debate.
by Iceland. I think they should
It's
do
a
it. Why
very
not?
emotional term to use
Yeah.
in a debate.
All right. What I would love to do is have a campaign to close down The Guardian. I think that would be hugely popular. I think because of their outlandish links to the slave trade, The Guardian should fall on their own virtue-signaling swords and close themselves down as a matter. They should cancel themselves. So if you're watching Guardian journalists, I know you probably are, I'm your guilty pleasure. If you're watching, cancel yourselves tonight.
And they'll do what you
It's
say.
the right
Yes.
thing to do.
They'll do
You
what
are
you say.
tarnished by your slavery background, and you must end the Guardian newspaper as a matter of urgency in the national interest, and then you can all run off and feel guilty for the rest of your lives about the shame you have
and they'll
wrought
do what you say.
on everybody.
And when you're writing out your check, Piers, I'll remind you how to spell my name.
I know how to
Very
spell
good,
your name,
very
Paula.
good, very
I know how to spell your
Very
name.
good. He writes a check to you.
But I'm first of all waiting for my check from the Romans and the Vikings,
Well,
which I will
get
be
it going.
aggressively pursuing.
Get it going.
Lovely to
But
see you
this is-
both. A spirited debate as always. And Hotep, thank you very much indeed. Over in America,
Thank you.
probably quite a good thing for you. You are several thousand miles away
No,
from these two
Hotep,
because
you're good.
they're beginning to steam over. I think you got them with the emotion line. Thank you both, all three of you, very much indeed.
Texas.
Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Barbie has long been criticised by feminists as a symbol of unattainable princess-like perfection. The iconic metal doll is now the inspiration for a Hollywood movie, one of the most anticipated of the entire year, capping Barbie's evolution from symbol of the patriarchy to feminist icon.
Barbie, small and so petite. Barbie has smart new styles for every occasion. For dates with Ken, club meetings, tennis. We can be the first in outer space. Meet me at the mall. Cool. What you gonna say next? Listen. Do you have a crush on anyone?
Anybody know how big the brain is? Sophia. It is medium. Medium.
What's going on? Why are these men looking at me?
Yeah, they're also staring at me.
So, fantastic plastic feminist icon or sexist claptrap? With the movie's outrageously dismissive tagline, she is everything, he is just Ken. Has Barbie actually done a full 180? Is she now anti, not just Ken, but men? Well, I'm joined by Talk TV contributor Esther Cracker, and also by Talk TV presenter Rosanna Lockwood, and also, drum roll, back from the world's longest holiday, by Grace Blakely, our socialist commentator. I love calling you that. Welcome back.
I love you called that.
Welcome back. We've almost missed you.
I have missed you very much as well, obviously.
Don't
Thank
lie.
you for having me.
And you're wearing your Barbie outfit.
I have apparently been told.
And you've
I
gone
look like
blonde
Barbie.
since I last saw you.
You did this on purpose.
I mean, I
You
can't
did this
say
to
that I
seduce
did.
me.
You actually now are. You are now
Honestly,
Barbie.
You did this to seduce me.
That is a massive compliment, honestly. If I look anything like Margot Robbie, I will take that.
So look, let's start with you then on this, given you've come dressed as Barbie. So there are a number of Barbie characters in the movie, right? One plays President Barbie, one plays Dr. Barbie, one plays a Barbie with a Nobel Prize in physics, one is a mermaid Barbie. However, all the male characters in Barbie world are simply called Ken. So it's pretty clear where this movie is going. This is an assault on not just Ken, but all men.
I mean, I think men in general will have to be a bit kind of snowflakey to suggest they're being assaulted by a Barbie movie. But I kind of think that's besides the point. I mean, I think, you know, the questions that we have around this one, whether or not Barbie is a feminist icon.
Is she?
Actually, well, I think it matters less than the fact that the Barbie franchise has commercialized the feminist critique. So now you can be like, oh, you can feel like a good feminist because you buy a doll for $25.99, or you can feel like a hashtag girl boss because Barbie has a Nobel Prize or Barbie's an entrepreneur. Whereas actually, feminism is rooted in the struggles of ordinary women. It's about the fact that, you know, women often get paid less. It's about the fact that women are on the front line of some of the hardest sectors to work in care, in our healthcare system, in social care. It's about the fact that they do so much unpaid labour in the household.
How many female bricklayers do you know?
I mean,
or female bin cleaners.
Great question.
What are you talking about?
Great question. Have you ever met a female bricklayer?
I don't know.
No, you haven't.
But I
Because
love
they
the
don't exist.
assumption that
You made
being
that
a
up.
bricklayer is harder than, like, caring for the terminally ill and dying.
Have you ever been a bricklayer in the winter?
But, like, have you ever been someone
A
looking after
caretaker?
the
Yes,
terminally ill
yes,
and
I
dying?
actually have. Yes,
like, it's
I have.
obviously
Yes,
a
I have.
very, very challenging job, isn't it?
And it's
like,
not as hard
it's-
as being a bricklayer.
But in what sense? What does that even mean?
Excuse me, you asked me if
Are
I've
we
done it
talking
before.
about-
Oh, I've missed
I
this.
have.
Yeah. Are we talking
I
about
have done it
whether or not it's
before.
physically challenging, emotionally challenging? I mean, there are care workers who are running up and down between houses getting paid less than minimum wage.
No, I
because
get
they're,
that, but you
know,
don't make a fortune as a bricklayer either, and you're out in the elements.
I just don't understand
Do you know
why
what? I'm
we're
gonna launch
pitting
a- I'm gonna
these
launch a
professions
campaign.
against each other. It's a bizarre culture.
Let me try and get one single word in here. So, Rosanna, look, Barbie's jobs include being an astronaut, a surgeon, Olympic athlete, downhill skier, aerobics instructor, TV news reporter, vet, rock star, doctor, army officer, Air Force pilot, summit diplomat, rap musician, presidential candidate, baseball player, scuba diver, lifeguard, firefighter, engineer, dentist, and many more. I mean, she's not a bad feminist icon. She's done everything.
She's had over 200 careers, apparently, since she was first conceived. But, you know
Is she a feminist icon?
Look, when you said unattainable princess, perfect like perfection, this is what you were thinking of. These three women here, who
It's
obviously,
true.
I think all three of us probably...
Perfectly imperfect. Can we settle on that?
Perfectly perfect.
We probably all played with Barbies growing up. I'm going to guess that.
Given Barbie's enormous reach now, given how many different Barbie dolls are out, you can almost have a Barbie doll for any type, whatever. Is she legitimately a feminist icon?
No, I don't think she is, but there are other toys available if
Does
you
she
don't
need
like
to
her.
be? Why
She
does,
doesn't
why
need
does
to be.
Barbie
It's-
need to be a feminist icon? Why can't girls just play with pretty dolls?
I
mean,
don't
why,
think
why
that she should be a
Young
feminist
girls
icon.
don't
I
even
don't think that-
understand anything to do with feminism.
I
They're
don't think
just
that
children.
feminism should be co-opted by massive multinational
Well,
corporations corporations.
that's
that are
fine,
seeking
but I
to
don't
profit
think
from
young
a
girls
critique
even
of
need to
basic
learn about
capitalism.
But Grace, what about if it's shaping the way young girls are growing up? That's what...
Well, I mean, I think this is the problem people have with feminism. This is why we end up having all these debates about, like, oh, you know, feminism doesn't account for the struggles of ordinary people and it's just, like, very rich and wealthy women at the top of companies saying, I want more money. It's because feminism, which is actually a critique of capitalism, in part, has been taken over by big multinational corporations who basically say, look, we have 3 women on our board, so the gender struggle is over. And it's just, this is a symptom of a wider problem.
All right, you mentioned gender. The Bank of England says anyone can get pregnant of any gender identity. They've offered to help staff to pay for gender reassignment treatment, including... Now, this has all been going on in your absence ad nauseum, some might think, this whole gender debate. But this concept that anyone of any gender identity can become pregnant is obviously ludicrous.
I mean, I'm going to start before even opening up into this discussion, talking about, yes, I've been away for 9 months, and I've come back and watched how our entire political debate has become dominated by this tiny, tiny fringe issue. We have this massive moral panic over an issue that affects so few people.
It's not a fringe
while
issue.
The climate is literally, like, the Earth is
you can care about,
towards
you can
a massive
care about the
tipping point,
climate, and you
while
can
there's
also...
a massive cost of living crisis going on. I was, honestly... just shocked that this is what we're talking about.
You can care about the climate, and you can also care about the full frontal attack on the integrity of women's sport because of transgender athletes. You can care about men rapists being put into female prisons. That cost Nicola Sturgeon her job, by the way. You can care about all those issues too.
And yet,
I would have thought you would have come back
about.
and gone, you know what, I've seen the light, Piers. You're right about this
And
stuff.
yet, this is what we're talking about.
I think
there is a reason that we are
extraordinary.
talking about this issue rather than the Bank of England just raised interest rates. That's going to mean that millions of families are not going to be able to repay their debt, repay their loans. They're going to be pushed into poverty. And here we are talking about some, you know, absurd thing about whether or not...
I think you've just hit the nail on the head, because shouldn't the Bank of England be more concerned with bringing down inflation rates than, you know, offering their employees...
Yes!
I'm sure this was just some sort of random thing that was...
No, it's not random.
That's
Rosanna, hang on. Bring Rosanna.
Random, but
Our economics expert.
if you look at the crux of the issue, this was actually probably a freedom of information request. Stonewall, the Bank of England applied to Stonewall to say, we want to be in your top 100 list of diversity and inclusion sort of index thing. This was last year they made this application. The information has only been revealed now, and I would say that that is the Telegraph and other papers capitalising on the argument that the Bank of England has lax monetary policy, and they're trying to make the argument that they've been too focused on diversity
That
and
it's
inclusion.
playing up to cultural
But let's be clear. Look,
Marxists and
you
the
can
woke
have,
brigade
yeah, but look,
or
you
whatever.
you can have 120,000 genders, as many as you like. Only women can get pregnant.
But, like...
I mean, that's just a biological fact. Only women get pregnant.
People
you can have
who
as many gender debates as you want. You can feel like a mouse for all I care.
Only
but you
people
can't
who were
actually pretend
born
anyone other than a
women.
biological female can have a baby.
Yeah, sure. Only people who are born women can get pregnant.
You
But
accept
people
that?
who are born women can also become men.
Not become,
And
they can
can't.
identify
people
as
who
anything
can't
they
become
can't.
men.
men can also legitimately become mothers.
No, they
That
can't
happens
become.
all the time.
They
Anyone
can't
can
become men.
They can.
No, biological men are biological men.
Yeah, I mean, if
They
you are
can be
born
trans.
women, you can become
They can
a
be
trans
They can
man.
be a trans man. That's simple
Yeah.
on that. Why do we have to change
I
everything?
mean, I agree. I made this point to you like years ago, and I thought we kind of settled it. You know, you have cis women and trans women and cis men and trans men. We don't have to get all up in arms about all this stuff. It just doesn't matter that much.
So I'm so glad you do still get up in arms about this. I've really missed this. Esther, I mean, I agree with you. The Bank of England, get on with fixing the economic crisis.
It's the optics of this that's even more frustrating, because you don't want a news story of the Bank of England, you know, paying for their employees gender transitioning when there are clearly bigger issues at hand here. But I think it's just this obsession with companies that feel like they have to, you know, talk about these issues all the time. I'm just happy for a business to function as a business. I don't need to know their stance on gender identity or anything like that.
Shockingly, I actually agree.
Well, that's in itself a shocking moment. Do any of you have a view about Johnny Bairstow and the way he was out at Lord's?
No,
I saw this. My dad showed me. This was the clip where
What did your dad say?
My dad said that it was perhaps slightly unfair to have knocked him out, and that there should have been. What did he say? That it should have been reviewed or something, and that ordinarily that's what would have happened, because there was some precedent.
Your
for
dad's right.
Okay.
No idea.
No view? No view.
Yeah.
less than zero.
Brilliant
Less.
pack today, and great to have you back.
Lovely
Grace.
to be back.
Really, I nearly almost enjoyed that segment. It's been great. I really missed you. Well, welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. An historic moment in American history. Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to all counts in court in Miami, facing 37 criminal charges over his handling of classified documents. He's the first current or former president to ever face federal charges. Commentator and author Meghan McCain joins me now. Well, Meghan, I just had a very robust defense of Donald Trump from Carrie Lake.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you share
and
that
I would just
view.
like to say, I think you're and I think you're one of the most even-keeled journalists working in media. I didn't understand how antagonistic.
It's when she says you lot, like we're all the same. Outrageous. But Meghan, great to have you on the show.
I was like, you were literally fired for free speech.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyway,
Thank you,
Meghan. It's a pleasure to be here as well.
It's great to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here as well.
What is your
I
reaction to this really quite historic moment? I mean, this is the first time any American president, current or ex, has ever been charged with federal charges. This is a big moment.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it will be something that my children will read about in history books. And it's, it's really disheartening. It's really depressing. As an American, it's embarrassing. I mean, the global culture is watching us and, seeing what's happening. He's by far the front runner, as you saw with your last guest. There are people that will vote for him if he is, sent to prison and would be running the country from prison. So it's amazing to me that, he's accused of 37 counts. It's a lot. General Petraeus almost went to jail for 3. So I think we're in a situation that is obviously unprecedented and, unusual waters, but that's no different than anything we've dealt with President Trump. I'm interested to see how the current group of people running for president on the Republican ticket are going to be handling it going forward, because right now a lot of them are defending him.
Right. I mean, that's the really interesting question, isn't it? Because at some point, the Republican Party has to make a decision about whether it can actually go forward with a guy who's facing not just state charges over hush payments to a porn star, but is now facing 37 incredibly serious charges on this indictment, about under the Espionage Act, about basically using classified documents related to nuclear power, to how you would go after enemy states and so on. This is not chicken feed. This is serious stuff.
No, and look, I woke up this morning to the news that I read online that there was a person who had gone to the White House and appeared topless at a pride party over the weekend. And I was just saddened and also horrified at the state of different kinds of things going on in the country. Joe Biden is an incredibly weak candidate. 75% of independent candidates, voters don't want him running for president. 80% of Republicans, over 50% of Democrats don't want him running for president. Republicans can literally only lose this election if we nominate Donald Trump. And it looks like that's what we're doing. And I think we're going to have a really hard look as to what our party, but also what our country is going to look like with him being the front runner. That being said, I don't see a lot of courage coming out of Washington, D.C. and courage coming out of these candidates running. There's no one I'm particularly excited about, including Ron DeSantis. And none of this is good enough. And I think part of it is if you walk this line where you're going to, suck up to President Trump and want to get his supporters, but at the same time want to, differentiate yourself from him, it's not something that's going to be possible. And I do think there is a lot of voter fatigue, and those 75% of independent voters are going to make or break this election. And if there's one thing we've learned, they do not like President Trump.
I mean, look, this whole debate around Trump has got so toxic, so tribal. I've had times when I've supported Trump, and I've had times, not least, when he attacked your great father, when I felt his behaviour has been completely sickening and demeaning of anyone who's ever held the office of president. So Trump is this kind of character where you can like him for some things and detest him for others, but he's got this extraordinary stranglehold over a large number of Republican voters. And if you're going to try and beat him for the nomination, you've got to somehow, as you've just rather well articulated, you've got to somehow bring those people with you without trashing their hero. It's difficult.
Yeah, and your last guest, not to make it too personal, but she went down that road and told anyone who voted for McCain to get the hell out, and that's exactly what happened to her. She is not the governor of Arizona, no matter what she thinks in her brain. And the exact same thing will happen to President Trump. He has lost Arizona, a very valuable swing state. This will come down to 3 swing states in the United States of America, as it always does. And President Trump has lost all 3 the last 2 election cycles. So I'm not exactly sure why we continue to put our cart next to this loser losing horse, especially given, as you said, the historic circumstances today. But, you know, I'm 38. I'm a different generation. I'm a different voter demographic. And there just seems to be a lot of, quite frankly, older boomers that have a stranglehold on the party and want to see President Biden get reelected. And I, for one, don't want an 86-year-old to be president leaving office in the next cycle. I think that's a very dangerous precedent for our country. And my understanding is, I work at a UK publication at a job you used to have at the Daily Mail, that a lot of our friends across the pond think it's quite bizarre that we have a president that's this old and would be that old if reelected.
Well, you could have a choice at the 2024 election if things go the way people fear, where you have a man who appears to be senile against someone who might actually have been convicted of federal offences under the Espionage Act. I mean, it's a completely extraordinary situation.
Yeah, and I think it's why a lot of people are looking at RFK Jr. I'm not a fan of his nor a supporter, but he has upwards of 20% of Democrat support right now, independent support coming strong. And I don't think it's that he's a particularly interesting candidate or politician. You know, I think he's an activist married to a famous actress, but I think it's just that people are just so thirsty for anything that's different than these two candidates. And just from a, you know, holistic standpoint for the American people, this is a very depressing, very scary time to have these two men as the most powerful men leading both parties. And I think it's a recipe for disaster. And I quite frankly think it's a recipe for even more disenfranchisement of what people call the establishment, what people call, you know, as Carrie Lake was saying, like people in media circles and establishment media. I don't adhere to that line of thinking, but it does make you very cynical about who's running things. And I think an example of that is the Democratic National Committee is not allowing President Biden to do any debates. I think the American public deserves to watch him debate any of the candidates who are running for president. And like I said, RFK Jr. has over 20%. Marianne Williamson has 10%. These are not numbers that any Democrat strategist should be ignoring right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. Megan, always read your columns in the Daily Mail. They're the second best columns the Mail's ever run, obviously.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
You always provoke thought, and that's the best thing about being a good columnist. So thank you very much indeed for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what does this all mean for the future of the Republican Party in the 2024 presidential race? Looking at live pictures here of a courtroom in Miami where the recently deposed President Trump has just been charged on 37 counts. 37 involving classified documents of the most top secret stuff involving America's nuclear program, its plans for potentially attacking enemy states and so on. Very sensitive stuff that he shouldn't have had in the first place. And then when he was asked to hand it back, according to the indictment, he didn't hand a lot of it back. So these are serious things. And you can explain away Trump, defend him as much as you want, feel like, you know, he's getting a hard time. The indictment is serious when you read it. Joining me now is the Conservative radio host, Ben Ferguson, host of the Rubin Report, Dave Rubin. All right, guys, there's a battle raging here now for the soul of the Republican Party and a real quandary. What does the Republican Party do about this growing number of legal issues that Donald Trump is facing? Ben Ferguson, where are we here? Donald Trump, all right, you have the Stormy Daniels stuff. You can sort of joke that away, say it's trivial, bit of a witch hunt, stupid. I don't disagree with that particularly. But this stuff, when I read the indictment, is very serious. If this was Joe Biden and it was leveled at him or Obama, you would be leading the charge probably to have him executed.
Not executed, but I would be leading the charge for classified documents. If you're going to have this level of accountability for a Republican, then damn it, you better do it for everybody on the left that has also done this. And there was no accountability. And this is going to be why this is not a big issue in the primary for Donald Trump. There was zero accountability for Hillary Clinton, the 3,000, 30,000 plus emails, literally telling her staff to take hammers to Blackberries and cell phones, zero accountability. And that's going to be the talking point for Donald Trump. I think he actually gets closer to the nomination today with this indictment because there are so many Americans, conservatives, that are sick and tired of a two-tier justice system where this system goes after Republicans and looks the other way when there's meetings on tarmacs between former President Bill Clinton and the Attorney General talking about Hillary Clinton. They've had enough of it. Now, does that mean that this is going to be a good thing for the Republicans and the general? I think it's way too soon to tell, Piers. But ultimately, right now, there's a lot of pissed off Americans that are sick and tired of this two-justice system here. And there's a lot of examples of it. I mean, for goodness sakes, look at the day they charged him. You've got intel that apparently $5 million went from one of the executives at Burisma in a bribery scheme to the sitting president of the United States of America. And the majority of the mainstream media was silent on it. So are people shocked by this? No, they're not. They're angry over it.
Let me bring in Dave, though, because the issue to me is there's also a political element to this. And if I'm a Republican, there's rapidly coming a point when you have clear options. I mean, you could have Ron DeSantis. I went down to Florida and interviewed him. I thought he was pretty impressive. He's a genuine conservative. He's been wildly successful in Florida, turning a 33,000 majority into 1.5 million. He's Trump without the baggage. He's very Trumpian in all of his policies. You know, Trump's tried to rubbish him and rubbish what he's achieved. It's obviously, in my estimation, complete nonsense, that charge. Why would the Republicans want to pursue the Trump road to nomination when it's so fraught with potential danger and when he might be the only person that could actually let Joe Biden win?
Well, the short answer to that is that Trump does have a certain captivation over the world in the last, decade or so that allows people to follow him whether things are working or not working. Look, at the moment, I agree with you and with Ben on this idea that the thing that people are most upset by at the moment is the selective prosecution and persecution of Donald Trump. When they see the asymmetry that Biden and Hillary and even Mike Pence as VP can get away with classified document things and Donald Trump can't, that asymmetry is what bothers people. But on the DeSantis front, I completely agree with you, Piers. We have what I think, and I moved to Florida during COVID in large part because of Ron DeSantis and moved my family here and 2 companies here. And I have a ton of flourishing people that I'm around now in a state that is functioning, I would say, really at the pinnacle of the world for freedom right now. We have a guy who has done everything he has set out to do in his legislative agenda. He has fought the woke. He has got the neo-racism out of the schools. He's gotten the gender stuff out. In effect, he beat Disney. He's doing all of the things that anyone who is conservative-minded or right-leaning or roughly Republican or even a disaffected liberal, which there's a lot of people. I think you're probably a little bit in that category. I think he's the guy that can get everybody out of this. But that's sort of a separate issue than what the base of the base, the Carrie Lake types, who I like how she's on one hand calling you a sellout and then also saying, God bless you, I love talking to you, that they're never going to leave the Trump orbit. But I think Ron DeSantis offers a chance for a whole bunch of new people to come into the fold. Trump, I just don't see where the new people are. Even putting aside all of the indictments and the craziness, where are the new Trump voters?
Well, that's a good question. Let me bring Ben back on that. I mean, the real issue is who can win the independents, for example. I just don't see independents liking any of this. They're all just looking at this aghast. And I don't disagree with you, by the way. There are legitimate allegations of double standards in the way that Hillary's emails and Joe Biden's documents and so on have been treated by the liberal-skewed mainstream media. I completely agree with that. But purely on Trump and what he's done here and what we apparently are going to hear from his own voice on a tape where he concedes these are not declassified documents, contrary to everything he's been saying. This is a real sword of Damocles hanging over the party. And you could end up with the most damaged candidate in history, and that might be the only way Biden, notwithstanding all his issues, ends up winning. So why is the smart play for the Republicans not to go for a much safer option of Ron DeSantis?
Great question. Look, I like Ron DeSantis. I said this, I don't want a civil war the night after Ron DeSantis announced. And I said, if you took Donald Trump's name and referred to him as candidate A and you took DeSantis' name off a page and said candidate B, both of those candidates, the Republican Party would be jumping up and down and screaming over. The difference, though, Piers, is this. There's a big asterisk now next to any accusations against Donald Trump. And the reason why many Americans, then in this, especially in this primary and going into the general, are saying, we don't believe you when you tell us that Donald Trump's a bad person. You said he was colluding with the Russians. We now know that the deep state lied to us. The top FBI and CIA directors were lying to us when they signed that letter, also saying the Hunter Biden laptop was not real, not authentic, and it had the markings of the Russian government.
But Ben, let me jump in. Ben, again, I know the line you're taking on this, and I don't disagree with you. I thought the Russian collusion thing was a load of trumped-up nonsense, no pun intended. I thought the way that the Hunter Biden laptop thing was suppressed by big tech was outrageous. But ultimately, we are where we are. And I still believe that the Trump route to victory for the Republicans in 2024 is fraught with danger.
Look,
final word. Well, hang on, I'm going to leave you there.
The argument he's going to make is he's going to say, do you believe me or believe them? Because every time they come after me.
I get that. And there are lots of people, lots of MAGA supporters that will believe him. Dave Rubin, final question for you. Who is going to win the nomination? Give me a name.
I really think Ron DeSantis is going to win the nomination. I think the polls are closing. I think the more people get to see him, get to see the competence, the clarity, his ability to communicate the right ideas, see his track record. He's 44 years old. He's younger than me. He's got 3 young kids, fantastic wife in the First Lady of Florida, Casey DeSantis. I think he's got the right message without the baggage. And I think as time goes on, I think you're right, Piers. People are getting tired of this. That is not an excuse related to the selective persecution of Trump. But everyone has a limit to how much they can take. And I'm hearing from an awful lot of people when I travel the country. They're like, we thank Trump. We appreciate Trump. He woke us up. He red-pilled us. But that doesn't mean he has to be king forever.
You know what?
And I think if he sees the writing on the wall, there's
Guys, I've got to leave it there, but it reminds me very much of our situation with Boris Johnson in this country.
Look at the donations. DeSantis got a lot of money coming in. Follow that as well, because there's a lot of people out there writing him big checks right now. And people said, oh, he's dead in the water. I don't think he is at all. I think this will come down to debates.
Also, I would look at the scores on the board. As DeSantis told me when I interviewed him, I'm a scores on the board guy. And he wins. And Trump, in the last few years, has been a perennial loser.